Hello and welcome back for another episode of this season of Try This on Wisp Sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kirstin Lauritzen, and today we have a question and answer episode, which is really fun. First off, I just wanted to say thank you for listening to the show. I don't think that I say it at the end of the episode every week, but I really wanted to just acknowledge and say thank you for listening. There are many of you that have showed up on social media, and I have, put something out there into the world, and then you have asked me a question or made a comment, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for doing that, because it's so fun to hear from you, and I really appreciate you listening to the show. So for today, first off, the second half of this show, we will do a question and answer. But I wanted to talk a little bit about training, because we do that every week. And there's a little bit of a perspective that I wanted to give, just simply because this last weekend I was going up to Seattle to visit my sister for her 30th birthday. And I had a lot of time in the car to be able to think about things. But one of the things that I've realized this past week. So first off, training has been going really well in the perspective that I really feel like it's a little bit different now. So when I was training for the Ironman in Coeur d'Alene, I just felt like everything that I was doing was just trying to get to a position where I was able to accomplish the thing. Right? Where I was trying to get to this point where I think that my mindset and my intentions that I set around those workouts were just about, I've just got to be able to get to a place where I know that I can confidently be able to show up for this race and be able to accomplish it. And that's where my mindset was. I also wanted to do as best as I possibly could, obviously, but I recognize now, looking back, that was a lot of my attitude going into those workouts was I need to just push and I need to do well and I need to build this foundation so that I can then accomplish this thing, because I have many other goals. So I knew at that time that wasn't going to be the only race that I was going to do. So this week, what I found is that we set this intention, especially for this December 5th, 70.3. It's the half Ironman in Indian Wells, which is basically Palm Springs, California. My intention was to have a faster swim. And this has currently been, and this will probably continue to be my main goal through into next year, is to focus on having a faster swim time, because it sets what I've recognized as a pattern. And I know I've said this before, but I recognize as a pattern that people who get into the swim and get done with the swim faster aren't in the weather as long and as bad when, you enter into the water later in the morning. So yes, I also want a faster time, but I also recognize that weather is just one of those things that is a big piece that we fight, right? And so obviously I've had a very interesting year with the weather, but that's one of the reasons why we're focusing on swimming. And what I noticed was that this week, and I've said this a few times to my coach, but this week I'm noticing that I'm in the lane that is the current lane where I am swimming. I am actually getting faster than some of the people that I've been swimming with for a long time. And I'm recognizing that I need to probably put myself into the next lane so that I can push myself and continue to get faster, right? The thing about all of this that I was thinking about as I was reflecting on how I was loving the fact that the intention that I set for this particular race coming up in December was to get faster at swimming is actually happening. And how cool that is that is actually occurring. The whole piece of this, though, that I find so interesting is that what I realized this week is that we don't necessarily just do this for race day. We do this because we love to see ourselves improve throughout the week, throughout the journey, right? Because race day is only one race. And in many ways, it helps, I think, also keep a perspective about why we do what we do and when races go well and when races don't go well. Being able to actually pay attention and love the journey in between is really what it's about. I also went up this weekend to, because it just happened to work out, but I went up to run a 10K with my coach and a few members on the team. And it rained the whole time and was 45 degrees. I was soaked to the bone and so cold. And for me, as many of you know, if you follow me on social media, I do not like the rain. And I really do not like running in the rain. But here I am running a 10K in the rain. And I'm just, and the wind is just like pounding into your face. And actually, there were a few times where the wind kind of like blew me to the side a little bit. And I was like, why am I doing this? Like, this is just why am I doing this? But the reason why, I also showed up for that race is that, again, I also know that I really need to improve my running, and doing more of these races helps you to do those things. It helps you to build the knowledge and a little bit more experience so that you know how to push at certain times. You start to get more confidence under your belt, right? Of like how you just can make better decisions based off of what's ahead of you. But why would you do that though? Yes, it's to be able to race and to be able to do those races and get through those race days and have a very fun time. But this is the question I asked myself. I was like, well, what makes a difference between a person who has an 11-hour race and a person who has a 16-hour race? And the person with the 11-hour race is disappointed in their time. And the person with the 16-hour race, barely making it through the cutoff time, is happy with their race. What's the difference there? And I think when you actually enjoy the overall journey of training, it helps us keep perspective on those race days. We keep an eye more on the bigger picture of what this is. And that, I think, is the ultimate reason why we do what we do and why we're continuing to train. And also what makes the in-betweens, the weeks where you look back on your swimming and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm actually getting better at this. That's crazy. What makes it's that journey that I think is really what all of this is about. And I'll say one more thing before we get into our bigger into my question and answer, is that when I signed up to work with my coach back in June of 2020, I was on a call with him. On the first call, I'd never talked to him before. And I said, well, I've got this Ironman coming up in 2020, and it was Santa Rosa. It's the one that got canceled. And that's how I ended up at the Coeur d'Alene Ironman. I wasn't originally going to do that one, but I said, I've got this Ironman coming up. Do you think you can help me get ready for this? And he was like, yes. But, ultimately with this, I don't really like to take on clients that are only looking to do one race. Like, I like to work with people over time. And looking back on that call, he was already coaching me on that call. And he was showing me that the goals that I have, that I want, and that I have big races that I still want to accomplish and achieve. Those don't happen in a month or 4 months. Those happen over years of time. Like, these are big things that we're wanting to accomplish. And it just takes time for the body to get to the point where you can do those things, and you can do them at a speed or at a time that you want to, accomplish, because it's fun to do them quickly. It's fun to push yourself for those times. And it's fun to see those race days, to see those PRs and to see that growth. But we see so much more of the growth. I think we just put too much weight right into race day, and you can actually see so much of the growth in the race weeks, in the days that in the training weeks, in the training days that we have. And so much more of this is maybe just not as much about that instant gratification of wanting to accomplish something so quickly, and really giving us a time to say, I'm going to look 3 to 4 years ahead, and this is where I want to be. And that's it just takes so much pressure. We put so much weight into those race days. Like, I know I just said that, but like, if we really think about it, we put so much expectations on ourselves. And I think that's ultimately where somebody that, finishes, I have a friend of mine that was also racing Coeur d'Alene that, raced in 11 hours, and I finished in 16 hours, and he was disappointed with his time. And I just remember like looking at his perspective on it being like, 11 hours is amazing. Like, that was like, my goal was to try to finish in 12 to 13 hours. And I had other circumstances, but, I ended up finishing in 16 hours. Does that, how can you look at that 11 hours and be disappointed with that? And it's just a different perspective on race day. Anyway, that's been the last bit of training. That's a bit of a revelation that I have. If you've been putting a lot of weight into race day and not necessarily celebrating some of the in-betweens and some of the training accomplishments, I do encourage you to maybe make that mind to set shift a little bit and start to pay attention to what you're accomplishing from day to day and in those training weeks, because I really feel like it's a lot more about the journey to get there than one race day. We spend so much more of our year training, and it's only 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 race days out of that entire 365 days of the year. So if you're struggling through training and you're struggling to keep sight of, what you want to achieve and what you want to accomplish and how you're going to get there, start just tuning into what you're doing week to week and day to day. And I also feel like this podcast and sharing all of this journey with you has absolutely changed how I see training. And that's been a fun thing to see. So we'll be back right after this short break with the Q&A session that we'll have next. Okay, so the first question that I had is from Bridget. So Bridget messaged me on social media, on Instagram, and she asked me a question about magnesium. I had just previously on my stories been talking about vitamin D, which I know we've talked about previously on this podcast and also on the Sound Bites podcast season that I did also on Wisp Sports, which you can find. It's season 2. You just look up wispsports.com and you can look for the Sound Bites season, and that will pop right up. And I covered a lot of different types of vitamins and minerals there. And one of the topics we covered was vitamin D. But she had a question about magnesium, which I think we also did cover on that Soundbites podcast as well. But she said, the question she asked was, I think I have low magnesium. I've been taking supplements for 15 years. I'm probably treating the symptom, not the cause. But is it okay to take magnesium tablets long term? Are there other sources or ways I can get in magnesium? It's a great question, because magnesium is one of those types of supplements that is very easy for athletes and active individuals to become deficient in. And there's few reasons for that. Number one, magnesium is used by a lot of things in the body. Magnesium is essential for your muscles, and especially for them to be able to recover. It's also used by your immune system. It's used by your adrenals, especially when you get stressed. So, and I think it would be fair to say that a lot of people have so slightly higher stress levels in general. So magnesium is going to be of high commodity with the body. And then if you put training on top of that and you are an athlete, which I know she is, she actually is listening from Australia, which is really cool. But anyway, there are a lot of uses for magnesium. And when you are training, when you are active, magnesium is going to be one of those things that you need to keep on top of. So is it necessarily bad to take them in supplement form? No. And to take them long-term? No, it's not. You can take them orally in like a powder or a pill form. You get a decent amount of magnesium from food. I know one particular food, a couple foods that are really high in magnesium are pumpkin seeds and also chocolate. Those are high in magnesium. But you can also get them in different ways as well. So magnesium, you can take an Epsom salt bath, and that is a great way to absorb magnesium through your skin. But you can also do a lotion or a gel. You can look on the internet, basically, and search for a magnesium lotion or gel, and I guarantee you'll find one. And all you got to do is really just put that on. If you have like tight muscles or something like that, you can just put that on those. I would put it on one area, right? So like if you have multiple tight muscles, like your traps or your quads or your calves, I would only put it on one of those areas at a time. And I just kind of work through that, just because it's the same way as oral supplements. If you take too much orally, a lot of people find that there's a point where their gut can't tolerate it anymore, and it gives them basically the runs. So it can cause a lot of movement in your GI tract. So the same thing actually can happen through the skin too. So I usually just recommend that you put it on one spot and you sort of just rotate through. And it is a really great way to get magnesium in, because you bypass the ability of the gut to absorb it, and the skin will absorb that magnesium a lot more efficiently and effectively. So that's one way to do that for sure. It does sometimes, though, those magnesium gels can get a little bit itchy if they're left on for, sometimes I'm able to just leave it on the skin and just go to bed and it's fine. But sometimes it can also feel like you just went into salt water and then you didn't shower, and it's got like, you just have that weird sort of sensation or feeling on your skin. That's essentially what it feels like. So leave it on for 5 to 10 minutes and then you can rinse it off. The best thing to do too, if you're really curious whether you are fighting a deficiency in magnesium, is to just run a panel and see how your magnesium levels are. That's a very good way to figure out if you are actually deficient. But for most people, you need magnesium, and if your body doesn't need it, it'll either sweat it out or it'll get rid of it, in the other elimination ways that we have. So it's not something that you're going to build up and have problems with necessarily, but it's used by so many different things, and so many people are deficient in magnesium that it's probably okay to be taking it for that long term. It's not going to do anything wrong, or it's not going to cause any problems. Unlike some of the other supplements that you can take, like your fat solubles, like vitamin D, vitamin A, vitamin E, those ones can accumulate in the body and they can have toxic repercussions. Same with iron, actually. Your body needs to keep some of those in a very specific range. We don't want too high or too low of those, but particularly when they become too high, they can become toxic, and that can be problematic. But magnesium isn't really one of those. So that's an answer to that question. It is okay to take those magnesium tablets long term, and if you're wondering what might be the cause of the low magnesium, I think I would just first start with getting a panel run and taking a look to see if you are actually deficient, and if the supplements that you are taking are actually helping you achieve better magnesium levels, and then going from there. And that also depends. She didn't give me any idea of what types of symptoms she's been having, but if you have, it's not a problem to take them long term. Okay, so next, a question from Heather. So she asked, can inflammation show up as tight or tense muscles? I've had a very tight neck, so tight sometimes that she can barely move it. And she was wondering if she should be adding anti-inflammatories or antioxidants into her routine after listening to the previous episodes on this podcast that we just did on inflammation and when to introduce antioxidants and when to take them off. And she also mentioned that she's a vegetarian or vegan. So, she won't always be able to increase protein through animal-based products and things like that. So The thing that I would say, first off, I'm not your doctor, so I can't necessarily tell you exactly what to do. There's a whole physical and exam and all the things that go into being able to, help people through health advice. But the thing that I would say when it comes to inflammation is inflammation can show up as tight or tense muscles. Absolutely. It can show up as pain. Inflammation can show up as all sorts of different types of symptoms in the body. The thing that I will remind you of is that being an endurance athlete, and actually just being an athlete in most sports in general, is an inflammatory endeavor. So going back to kind of what I talked about in those episodes before, if your body is showing signs of inflammation like that, where it's painful or very tight or tense muscles, that, and especially if it's showing up right before a race, that's a sign that you've potentially hit that overreaching, overtraining side of things. So yes, essentially what you would have wanted to do is when those symptoms first came on is potentially introduce those anti-inflammatories and antioxidants then to try to overcome that inflammation and lower that down so that you could then turn that situation around and then head back up into training again. Because the point of that was that if you are inflamed, I made this point at the end of, I think, last week's podcast, but if you are inflamed and to a point where there's too much inflammation, the body isn't necessarily going to absorb the training that you're putting in, right? So you would put antioxidants or anti-inflammatories in at that point to try to turn that around so that we can mop up that inflammation, get the body reset so that then we can enter back into that training cycle and be able to take you off those antioxidants and anti-inflammatories and let you go back up into your training cycle and head back up into those adaptations. The point of that was that at the beginning where you wanted to start was with all your vitamins and mineral levels as awesome as they can be, some, lower inflammation levels, and then allowing, as you head into training, allowing your body, so we take all those antioxidants and anti-inflammatories out, and we allow your body to go through a workout, and then we make sure we optimize sleep, we make sure we optimize nutrition, make sure we optimize hydration, and allow your body to adapt to that training on its own. So you're training your body to be able to mop up the inflammation that happens from training. And then you do your training tomorrow, and then you do your training the next day. And we go through that same thing and that same process until you see a plateau. And if you start getting aches and pains or some tight muscles or tension or whatever it is that you are experiencing, that's when we change what we're doing, or we put something in to help to counteract. Because if the body's getting overloaded with inflammation, then we need to change that, and that's that sign that you're headed into overreaching. So the point of all of this, though, isn't just that you know when to do certain things and how to work all of these things. The point is to understand that, and actually to sort of change our mindset around training and how we're seeing food and supplements. The point is to, ultimately what I want you to do is to be getting as much as you possibly can from food, and to be optimizing and to be focusing on the importance of sleep and the importance of eating enough food to support what you're doing, and the importance of staying hydrated, and to really focus on those things. And then to listen to your body when things are different and they're not right. And instead of putting more training in, we take a step back and we say, okay, what do I need? Maybe all I need is just a week of rest. We reset, and then you head back in again. That's the idea, that you're listening to what's happening, and you're not just trying to push and push and push and push and push the body to a point where it then breaks. Hopefully that answers that question. The last question that I have for today that I want to answer is from Frank. And I actually know a little bit more about this particular athlete, so I'll give a little bit of background. he said, I've seen a ton of improvement from working on my GI tract, and currently I'm starting in on a new strength program. But one of the things that I have questions about is how much I should be eating. And I'm not sure what and how much to eat, because I tried eating a bit more and I gained a bit of what felt like fluffy muscle mass. And I prefer to stay lean for triathlon training. I'm worried that if I eat more protein, et cetera, because I don't want to gain weight, like I prefer to stay at 6 to 7%-ish body fat. Like that's where I like to be, or somewhere in there. Am I potentially hurting something by not wanting to eat more? I don't really deal with injuries or body pain, but I do have an autoimmune disease, and that's why I'm working on my GI tract. So for this particular person that I know, I took a step back, and if you have a question like this, I want to highlight something very important here. This particular athlete has dealt with autoimmune disease and flare-ups that are, and he's raced Ironmans through those seasons of, and during flare-ups of his autoimmune disease. And he said to me, I don't really deal with injuries or body pain, so I don't think that that's, necessarily an issue. And I said, okay, but you are oftentimes working yourself into an autoimmune flare-up. So unfortunately for you, what you see is you're fine because your body doesn't hurt, you have enough energy and all of these things. But dealing with training for that Ironman, at some point, that inflammation gets high enough that it triggers your immune system. And instead of you seeing it as body pain or injuries or something else, it triggers something internal. So you can't actually feel or see what's happening until you're now in a flare-up. So the reason why I chose this question is because I want to help you be able to take a step back and say, if I have this thing going on inside of the body, I would prefer you to think about, I need to be eating enough food. I need to be supporting what I do. We need to change our mindset about why we're doing what we're doing. The reason why I want you to eat more protein, the reason why I want you to be doing some of these things that keep inflammation under control is so that we can help you not get that autoimmune disease flare up, right? So I said, and this is what happens for so many people is they say, well, that's not me. I don't get injuries. I don't get inflamed. I don't get yada, yada, yada. I don't see myself that way. But then when we take a step back and we look at that athlete, what we see is they have something else going on. Everybody has symptoms, and everybody has something that happens when they reach that point where the body has so much load that then it triggers something. Everybody has it. So you might not see it as pain, or you may not see it as an injury, but what's happening for you is autoimmune. And the reason why I want you to be following this different way of thinking is because I want you to get to race day and not be in a flare-up. I want you to get to race day and be healthy. And I want you to be really fit. I want you to be super strong. And I want you to be able to not have to worry about this triggering a flare-up. I want you to be able to race and not see that autoimmune disease show up anymore. And that's the reason why when I talk about eating enough protein and eating enough food in general, enough calories per day, it's because I really want you to get to those days, and I want you to be able to get through your races next year. Because keep in mind, this athlete also didn't race this year because he was in about an 18-month flare up with this particular autoimmune disease. And that's why and I think he actually did find me through I think he actually found me through this podcast. Anyway, he was he was dealing with this autoimmune flare, and it was preventing him from racing. And so now what we're doing is we're not just helping him accomplish, getting this autoimmune disease under control, but what we're doing is we're helping him actually take a perspective on training and on how you support your training so that we can get you to that race day super healthy. And that is why we talk about what we talk about here on this podcast, because I want you to get to race day and be healthy. I don't want you to be dealing with, like Heather mentioned, I also know a little bit of history about hers as well. And she was getting some of that tension and tight and pain right before Worlds in Utah this past year. I think it was the 70.3 Worlds. And she was leading up to that race. And I think she almost didn't compete because of that. And this is the point again, which is I don't want you to be dealing with those things a month out from race day. I want you to be thriving a month out from race day. And I want you to be allowing your body to adapt from the training that you're doing. And as soon as we see those symptoms, we make changes so that you can then go into that next, we do whatever we need to do in order to help get that body to turn itself around again. And then you head right back in again. But the thing is that what so many people do is they just let these things go, and they just spend a whole bunch of time just allowing these things to just simmer and like fester essentially. And then it gets so bad that then they start listening to their body. But we want to take a step back and we want to say, okay, this just started. What do I need to do about it? Here's a metaphor before we wrap up. An analogy or a metaphor. Let's say you buy a Ferrari, okay? And let's say you don't do the oil changes on time. I'm going to use this metaphor in two ways. So the first one is, let's say you don't give it oil changes. Let's say you only put in regular gas and you just drive the thing until you just drive it basically into the ground, right? Because if you don't do oil changes, and actually with the Ferrari, the metaphor in this one is really what we want to do is if you buy a Ferrari, you should be putting the best gas into that Ferrari, right? You should be putting not the regular, but the premium gas into this Ferrari. You should be changing the oil with the best, synthetic oil, because this thing is a machine. Like a Ferrari is an incredible car. For example, there's plenty of them. I don't know why I chose Ferrari, but we'll go along with it. The idea is that if you think about your body as a Ferrari, if you put a bunch of junk into it, then it's not, eventually that machine, your body, is going to break down, right? So that's one piece. The second metaphor in this is also, again, picturing a car or a Ferrari or whatever, because that's what we usually associate. And you can understand how this goes with a car. Let's say the warning signal goes on in your car that, I don't know, let's say the tire pressure's off. Maybe some of you may be similar to me. Ignore that for a little while. But let's say you start to hear a noise in the car. And it's this like squeaking kind of weird noise. And that's unusual. And you kind of just let it go. And then you let it go a little bit longer. And maybe it gets a little bit louder. And then finally that check engine warning sign comes on. And if you don't do something about it, it's very likely you're going to end up stuck on the road somewhere, and where you were trying to get to, you're now not going to get to because you didn't listen to the warning signals and signs that the car was giving you, right? It's the same thing with the human body. If we had gone and if we had said, oh, that squeaky noise, my engine doesn't usually make that noise, I'm going to go and have somebody check it out, then we never would have been stuck on the side of the road and now not getting wherever we were needing to get to. And then having the whole thing just have to completely turn it around and spend time, getting it fixed. Maybe it's more money than it needed to be, yada, yada, right? The point is that for the human body, it's the same thing. If you start to notice that things aren't quite right, the time to deal with it is right when you start to notice that things aren't quite right. It's to take a step back and reevaluate, to check what's going on, just like a mechanic would check a car. They look at, okay, what are the potential signs that the car is making noise? We look at the belts. We look at this. We look at right? They look at all the things that what could potentially cause it. It's the same thing here. We want to take a step back and we want to say, am I sleeping enough? Am I hydrating enough? Am I, eating enough food? And then from there, dig deeper if it's not one of those things. So I hope that metaphor helps. But the point of it all is that I don't want you to get to race day, and I don't want you to be that broken down car on the side of the road that's not finishing that race. I want you to be the car that is like a Ferrari, that is functioning fabulously, and that has exactly what it needs in order to perform well. And that is what I want. And that's the purpose of this show, is to help you be able to get to that race day and be able to thrive and to be able to perform at the level that you feel like you should be performing at, that your body is capable of. That's where we want to get to. And I don't want fueling or hydration or some of these other health related things to be something that doesn't allow you to perform as best as you possibly can. And that's our episode for now. Again, thank you so much for listening. I know I said this in the beginning of the show, but I cannot say it enough. I so appreciate you being here. Make sure to follow Wisp Sports on all social media channels, and make sure to share this episode with anyone you think might love it. You can also follow me at Dr. Kirstin on Facebook and Instagram, and drkirstin.com. If you'd like to reach us with any questions or comments about the episode, you can at info@wispsports.com. And you can always leave a direct message with us over on social media as well. Thank you for listening, and I will be back next week. Take care.